used to think tiredness was just part of getting old. Like reading glasses or forgetting why you walked into the kitchen. You just sort of arrived one day and decided to stay. But as the years passed, somewhere between 65 and now in my 80s, I realized this tiredness was different. It wasn't the kind that came from hard work or a poor night's sleep. No, it felt deeper, like something inside me had dimmed a little, like a light in a back room I forgot to turn on. I remember one afternoon, I was sitting on the porch, same spot I always sit, sipping lukewarm tea and watching the leaves do their quiet ballet in the breeze. I'd slept well the night before, or so I thought. Ate a good breakfast, went for a walk even. But by 2 o'clock, I felt like gravity had doubled its hold on me. My limbs weren't just heavy, my thoughts were too. And I remember thinking, is this what the rest of the road feels like? But it wasn't always like that. Back when I first retired around 66 or so, I had this rush of freedom. No alarms, no meetings, just long mornings and the smell of coffee that didn't come with urgency. But slowly, that freedom turned into something else. A kind of weightless drifting, like I was floating through my own days, and the air was thin. I started skipping things. Morning walks became afternoon maybes. Breakfast turned into toast and coffee or just coffee. Conversations got shorter, not because I didn't care. I just didn't have the spark. And I noticed it wasn't just me. Friends I used to catch up with, vibrant folks, storytellers, jokers, began to say things like, I just don't have the energy these days, or everything feels like an effort. And that's when I started to really look closer. The first thing I noticed, embarrassingly simple, was water. I wasn't drinking enough of it. Thought I was. But when I thought back, I realized most days I had a few sips here and there. Maybe a glass with my pills. Tea in the morning. That's it. Turns out, your body doesn't shout for water the way it used to. It whispers. And I wasn't listening. Once my daughter came over and said, Dad, your lips look dry. Have you been drinking water? I laughed it off, but that night I left a pitcher by my chair and tried to sip more throughout the day. Within a week, I felt clearer. Not younger, just less fogged. Like someone had washed the windows in my head. It was so small, but it helped. Then there was the sitting. Oh, the sitting. First, it felt like rest. I'd sink into my favorite chair, maybe watch the birds or an old western. But as time went on, I realized the more I sat, the more I wanted to sit. And the more I sat, the more exhausted I felt. Not the kind of exhaustion from work, but from stillness. Strange, isn't it? You do nothing and somehow feel like you ran uphill in wet socks. I read somewhere that the body starts to match its energy to its movement. So if you move little, it gives you little. I didn't want to believe that. But when I started to just stand up every hour, even for a few minutes, stretch, walk to the mailbox, sway to some old jazz, it made a difference. Not a miracle, just movement. Enough to remind my body that I was still here, still needed. And then there was the quiet. Not peaceful quiet, heavy quiet. The kind that creeps in when the house is too still for too many days in a row. When no one calls. When the TV fills the silence but not the space. I realized I had started carrying a kind of invisible tension. Not fear exactly, just something unspoken. Worry about my health, about the world, about being alone and not wanting to say it out loud. That kind of quiet stress, it doesn't show up like a panic attack or a breakdown. It just sits in the background, humming, wearing you down like a stone in your shoe. You barely notice it until you can't walk quite right anymore. One night, I tried something. I wrote down everything that was buzzing around in my head. Just scribbled it all on an old envelope. Fears, what ifs, even silly things like, did I defrost the chicken? I folded it, stuck it in an empty cigar box, and told myself, that's tomorrow's mess. Funny thing is, I slept better. Now, I do it almost every night. There was also something no one really warned me about. The way certain foods that once brought comfort started to quietly betray me. I didn't change much about what I ate after retirement. Toast with jam in the morning, maybe a bowl of cereal before bed. A sandwich here, a cookie there. Familiar things. Easy on the teeth, quick to prepare. But somewhere around 70, I noticed something strange. I I'd eat, then feel like I needed a nap almost immediately after. I chalked it up to aging, until my doctor gently pointed out that I was feeding myself like a 6-year-old with a sweet tooth. Turns out those easy meals? They were sugar traps. Quick carbs. No staying power. My energy would spike and then vanish like a matchstick, a quick glow, then nothing but smoke. My granddaughter, bless her, started sneaking little things into my meals. A handful of almonds with lunch. Avocado on my toast. Hard-boiled eggs instead of muffins. I resisted at first. Told her, old dogs, you know? But over time I started to feel steadier. Less like I was drifting from one nap to the next. It wasn't a diet, just a quiet recalibration. Funny how something as small as a few walnuts could make your spirit feel less brittle. But perhaps the most deceiving part of that season of life was sleep. Or, more accurately, the illusion of it. I thought I was sleeping fine. Went to bed at a decent hour. Woke up without an alarm. But no matter how many hours I spent in that bed, I'd wake up feeling like someone had pulled me backwards through the night. Groggy. Unrest. My dreams, if I had any, were like static, faint, forgettable. It wasn't until I stayed with my son for a week that I realized something was off. He walked into the guest room one morning and said, "Dad, you're up 5 times a night. You talk in your sleep. You leave the bathroom light on." I hadn't even noticed. We tried turning off the television before bed. He bought me a little white noise machine, sounds of gentle rain. Switched the mattress topper to something firmer. I even reluctantly agreed to try magnesium supplements. Within a few nights, I dreamt of my wife for the first time in what felt like years. She was wearing that sky blue dress she loved. Laughing. We were just walking through a garden. I woke up crying, but not from sadness. Felt like my soul had exhaled. I learned that sleep isn't just time passed. It's where your body does the maintenance work. Where your heart rests, your mind clears, your hope gets polished. I had been lying down for 8 hours, but I hadn't really slept in years. And then there was the light. Not metaphorical light, I mean actual honest-to-God sunlight. I spent years indoors without realizing the toll it took. Curtains drawn to keep out the heat. Lights dimmed because my eyes are sensitive. But all that darkness became a quiet kind of forgetting. I forgot what morning felt like on my skin. Forgot how the breeze carried stories from one porch to the next. I didn't realize how much I needed the sun until I started sitting outside again. 15 minutes a day. That's all. With a cup of coffee and my old cardigan. And wouldn't you know it? My mood lifted. I stopped feeling like a houseplant that had been shoved into the back corner of the room. I felt like me. That porch became my sanctuary. Birds chattering. Neighbors walking by with their silly little dogs. The light warmed not just my body, but the frozen places in my thoughts. There's something holy about fresh air. It reminds you that you're still a part of the world. Still in motion. Not just watching life go by like reruns on a dusty television. And if you're still here, still listening to this old man's ramblings, maybe you know what I mean. Maybe you felt it too. That strange tiredness that lives in your bones, not just your muscles. The kind of weariness you can't nap your way out of. So let me ask you something. Have you felt it lately? That deep fatigue? That drift? If you're still here, leave me a comment. Tell me which part rings true. I don't need a paragraph, just a word, a nod, a yes, that's me. Sometimes knowing someone else feels the same is enough to soften the edges of that silence. We're not as alone as we think we are. I wish I could say that once I adjusted my meals, slept better, drank more water, all that tiredness vanished. But no, there was another kind, a different sort of drain I didn't expect. It came when I lost my sense of purpose. No ceremony, no announcement. It just sort of faded, slowly, like a lamp dimming in a room you hadn't realized was darkening. After retirement, there's this strange in-between. At first, it feels like freedom, like you've earned your rest. But then the days get quiet, and quiet starts to stretch. You wake up and think, what am I waking up for? No job, no one calling on you, no little ones tugging at your sleeve. I remember one morning, standing at the sink, toothbrush in hand, staring out the window at nothing. I had no plans, no urgency, and for the first time, I thought, if I disappeared today, would it matter? That thought shook me, not in a dramatic way, just honest. I wasn't sad. I wasn't depressed. I just didn't feel needed, and I didn't realize how deeply that need had kept me alive all those years. Purpose isn't always a grand thing. You don't have to build a library or write a book. Sometimes, it's something as small as knowing someone's expecting you at lunch, or that your dog is waiting by the door, or that the tomato plant on your patio leans toward the sun because of you. I started making small appointments with my own spirit. Water the plant, write a postcard to an old friend, organize the junk drawer. Some days, I just sat with music I hadn't listened to since my 20s and let the memories bloom. Little by little, the spark returned. I think what many people don't realize is how much energy comes from meaning. It's not just the food you eat or the pills you take. It's whether you feel connected to something beyond your own skin. And when that thread frays, you feel it. Not in your muscles, but in your will. There's another thing no one really talks about. Medicine. Now, I'm no expert, but I can tell you this. By 70, my pill organizer had more compartments than my garage. One for blood pressure, one for cholesterol, one to help me sleep, another to keep me awake. Half the time I forgot what they were for. I just knew I was told to take them. And the side effects, they don't always hit you like a freight train. Sometimes they creep in subtle, slow. A little fogginess, a little dizziness, a weariness that feels like gravity's grown stronger. I was tired for almost a year before someone, not a doctor, but a young pharmacist at the grocery store, asked if I'd ever had a full medication review. I hadn't. Turns out, 2 of my prescriptions were pushing against each other like a couple of old mules. One made me drowsy, the other agitated my sleep. We adjusted, carefully, slowly, and within weeks, it was like someone had pulled a heavy blanket off me. I was still old, still creaky, still forgetful, but I was awake again, present, like I'd been underwater and finally broke the surface. Don't ever underestimate how powerful those pills can be, both for good and for harm. But of all the things that drained me in those years, the one that cut the deepest was the loss of joy. Not happiness. That comes and goes like weather. I mean joy. The spark. The giggle that bubbles up when something surprises you. The smile you give yourself when you hum an old tune while doing the dishes. I went years without it. Not because I was miserable, but because I stopped doing the things that made me feel alive. I told myself I was too old to dance, too stiff to garden, too tired to learn something new. So I stopped trying, and that, more than anything, emptied me out. Then one day, my neighbor, a widow a few years younger, invited me to a painting class at the community center. I laughed out loud. Me? Paint? I can barely hold a pen. She shrugged and said, "That's not the point." So I went, out of curiosity more than hope, and I painted a terrible orange tree, crooked, blobby, out of proportion. But when I looked at it, I smiled, because I had made it. I created something from nothing, and in that act, I felt something light up inside me that I hadn't felt in a long, long time. That night, I slept like a child. After that first painting class, I began noticing things again. The color of the sky at 6 a.m., the way light slants differently in winter, even the smell of my old wool blanket, how it reminded me of camping with my brothers in 1958. Strange. The details joy brings back, like they were never gone, just waiting behind a fogged-up window. I started looking for more of that feeling, not chasing happiness, no, just little flickers of still here. I joined a small writing group, mostly women, and every Tuesday afternoon we wrote poems about nothing in particular. One week I wrote about a spoon, just a spoon, but it had belonged to my mother, and suddenly, I remembered the way her hands moved when she stirred soup, the way she hummed a little off-key. I hadn't thought about that in 40 years. That's the thing, when joy returns, memory comes with it. And memory, my friend, is fuel. But I also learned that sometimes, tiredness doesn't come from the soul or the food or the silence. Sometimes it comes from what's missing inside the body. I was always proud of how healthy I ate, or so I thought. But around 72, I began feeling like I was walking through molasses. Legs heavy, mind fuzzy. I even forgot the name of my neighbor's dog one afternoon. A dog I'd known for 6 years. I laughed it off, but inside I worried. Eventually, my daughter insisted I get a full blood panel done. I grumbled about it. I'm fine, just old. But I went, and wouldn't you know it, I was running low on just about everything. B12, vitamin D, iron, magnesium. The doctor said something about absorption changing as we age. That what once came easy, from eggs, sunshine, leafy greens, now needed a little help. I started supplements. Nothing fancy, just enough to give my cells the spark they were missing. Within weeks, I was sharper, more awake, not invincible, just less dim. It made me realize how easy it is to blame age for everything. I'm tired because I'm old. I forget things because I'm old. Sometimes that's true, but often, it's a whisper from the body saying, help me, just a little. The hard part is, these little shortages don't shout. They don't knock you over. They just wear you down slowly, like shoes that don't quite fit. You can still walk in them, but every step takes more out of you than it should. And then, I'll tell you this plainly, some days you're just tired because you've lost the thread. Not of life, but of your life. You wake up, you do the things. Pills, breakfast, maybe a show or two. And yet by noon, it feels like the world is moving without you. I started to feel like a background character in someone else's movie. So I asked myself something I hadn't asked in decades. What would I do today if energy weren't the problem? Not what should I do, not what's expected, but what would make my spirit sit up a little straighter. One day it was baking a pie from scratch. My wife used to do that every Sunday. I found her old recipe card, butter-stained, flour-dusted, and followed it exactly. Even messed up the crust like she used to. When I pulled it from the oven, the smell nearly undid me. It wasn't just pie. It was her. It was us. Another time, I offered to read to children at the library. Just once. Thought they'd laugh at the old man with the soft voice. But they didn't. They leaned in, asked questions. One little boy hugged me on the way out and said, "You sound like bedtime." I didn't know what that meant, but it stayed with me. These small acts, simple, honest, they gave me back more energy than any nap ever had. Because they reminded me I was still useful, still capable of bringing something warm into a cold room. And when you feel useful, everything shifts. You walk taller. You breathe deeper. You smile without noticing. Of course, not every day is like that. There are mornings when I wake up and everything aches. Knees, back, even my patience. There are days when the world feels too loud, too fast, or too far away. And there are moments when I catch myself staring out the window, wondering what comes next. But the difference now is I no longer believe that feeling tired means I'm broken. It just means I need to listen more closely. Sometimes, it's the body whispering, "Be gentle with me." Other times, it's the heart saying, "Bring me something to look forward to." And once in a while, it's the soul asking, "Do you still remember who you are?" And when I listen, truly listen, the answers come. Not all at once. Not in big, dramatic ways, but in small things. In the warmth of sunlight on my hand. In the sound of an old song crackling through a dusty radio. In the joy of peeling an orange and remembering my grandson's face when he first tasted one. These aren't miracles. They're markers. Little reminders that I'm still here. Still alive in the way that matters, with attention, with care, with choice. If there's one thing I've learned since turning 65, it's this. Energy isn't just about sleep or food or vitamins. It's about how connected you feel. To your body, to your purpose, to the people who know your name. And when that connection slips, even a little, the tiredness sneaks in. Not as punishment, but as a nudge. A gentle knock from within, saying, "Come back. Come home to yourself." So I do. I drink the water. I stretch my legs. I sit outside and let the sky remind me how big and how beautiful everything still is. I laugh at things I don't understand. I cry when something old returns, like a memory or a dream. I forgive myself for slow days, And I lean into joy not as a goal, but as a practice. The strange, getting older. There's no map, no manual. But every now and then, if you pause and pay attention, you get these little flashes, like lanterns lighting up a foggy path. And that's what keeps me going. Not the idea of being young again, but the quiet decision to be fully here, today, as I am. If you've walked any part of this road yourself, if you've felt that weight, that fog, that strange fading of your spark, I want you to know you're not alone. You're not broken, and you're certainly not done. There is still light in you, still warmth, still chapters yet to be written in the quiet hours between sunrise and dinner. So take care of yourself. Go outside even if it's just to wave at a squirrel. Drink your water. Eat something that remembers where it came from. Say yes to something small that makes you smile. And if you'd like to return, you know where to find me. This space doesn't go anywhere. We're just here, gently walking each other home, one story at a time.